Hey LinkedIn, and welcome back to Business Unusual. This is a live show brought to you by the LinkedIn News team where we're talking as a community about the changing nature of work. I'm Caroline Fairchild, editor-at-large at LinkedIn, coming to you from my home office here in New York City. It's Monday, August 31st, and here's just a quick look at the top stories that are trending today on LinkedIn. China is throwing a wrench in the TikTok deal. The country is tightening restrictions on AI technology exports, which would affect a potential sale, that says from the Wall Street Journal. Microsoft, which owns LinkedIn, and Walmart are reportedly putting in a joint bid for the TikTok later next month. And the extended pandemic is impacting home sales. It's encouraging many longtime New Yorkers to flee the city for the suburbs. Home sales in the area surrounding the city are up 44% this summer. Meanwhile, sales in Manhattan are down 56%. For more stories like these, be sure to check out the news module to the right of your LinkedIn feed. And if you're on mobile, click into the search box. That brings us to the main story that we have for you today. As the pandemic continues on, HR leaders across the country are having to navigate uncertainty in real time with employees. On today's show, we'll speak with experts as well as HR leaders from some of the biggest employers in the country about how they're communicating with employees during these uncertain times and what the path forward is for HR. But before I bring on our guests, we want to hear from you through the poll that we have for you today. We've been polling LinkedIn members on the news page about their summer vacation plans as summer comes to an end. Were you able to take a summer vacation or staycation this year? A, yes. B, you're hoping to maybe this fall. C, no, or D, other. Share your comments in the stream and we'll reveal the results of the poll at the end of today's show. So I want to introduce the first guest that we have for you on today's show. She's Sue Bingham. She's joining us from the High Performance Workplace Group, and she's been advising companies on how to lead employees through all of this uncertainty. I'm interested in getting her take on how this pandemic will impact HR overall. And with that, I want to bring Sue to the show.
Thank you.
Hi, Sue. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Thanks for joining us. Take us back to March when this pandemic really started to take off here in the US. What were some of the main concerns and challenges that you were hearing from HR leaders at that time?
Well, just pretty much chaos, as I'm sure you'll hear from the panel. I remember we spoke to one senior HR leader who worked for a government security firm, and not only was she needing to deal with the cultural differences, she also needed to deal with the security issues. It was crazy. I don't know how she managed it all.
And how has that suite of challenges changed now that this, what some may thought was just a blip on the radar, is the new normal for how work is done moving forward?
Well, I was really glad to see that there was a change. I think it's overdue. I think employers have needed for some time as we look ahead to be focused on more flexibility, to be focused on less regimentation, more, and I don't want to say involvement, I want to say actually more power to the employees that are there. So I see the HR role as changing dramatically from one that oftentimes had more of a compliance focus or a risk mitigation focus to one that's truly adding a lot of value to the organization.
And for HBR recently, you wrote an article where you were talking about how HR leaders need to adopt what you call a complexity mindset. So what is a complexity mindset and why is that important now during this time?
Well, I think probably the best thing to do is differentiate between complicated and complexity. Complicated is where you've got typically a linear line. It's a problem. It's been there before. It's complicated, but you can solve it. You have stated practices that have worked in the past. Complexity is where things are coming at you, and there isn't any known way of dealing with those. And in this case, that's where really we've got to be extremely flexible and relying on our people and the collective intelligence of the folks who are participating in the organization. So the difference is really one of being able to sort through the facts and figure out a process to really just being able to adapt very quickly.
And a lot of companies that just didn't promote flexible workplace practices are now having to do that in real time on the ground just to get work done. How is that going and what are the biggest challenges that they're facing?
Well, I don't want to get on a rant here, but I think that the barriers we used to hear toward leaders in some large companies was that, working from home needed to be earned. It was a trust issue. It was those kinds of things, and negative assumptions about people and what they'd be doing at home. And we preach the opposite, that people are, the vast majority of people are really good. They want to do a good job. They work very hard. It doesn't matter where they're working from. They will do the job, and especially with clear expectations and communication. I think what's the key role for HR is to encourage senior leaders to continue to see the value in flexibility, to continue to see the value in the increased communication, and to really focus on measuring results versus activity. One of the things I read recently was that there was a lot of software flying off the shelves where company executives wanted to measure the amount of activity that was going on at home, and activity isn't equal to results. And what we really need to be looking at is results, and not adopting a big brother approach.
Of course. You mentioned clear and concise communication. I think it's fair to say that there is nothing clear about this pandemic and how it's going to roll out. How exactly can HR leaders build trust with their employees when they're sending out messages, sometimes daily, on information that they don't have certainty about?
Well, I think your panelists can probably address that better than I can. It's been quite a while since I was in a senior HR position within a company. Been doing consulting for the last 20 years. But what I would say is that the thing they can do is encourage the leadership, the management, give them talking points. And encourage the management to constantly be using Zoom or any other platform to have face-to-face communication, to be on the phone with folks. It's the managers that HR can send the headlines, but the managers really need to be able, or the leaders, to follow up, and continue to develop that relationship.
And Sue, before I let you go and take care of that dog that I'm hearing in the background,
I'm so sorry.
It's completely fine. We see it every day here on Business Unusual, and I love dogs, so you're welcome to bring them onto the show if you want.
No.
How are you hoping that the HR function is going to change moving forward? You mentioned some things at the top of our conversation, but what are the hope here for you in terms of how the pandemic can improve the way that employees work with HR moving forward?
Well, I think that. I think moving away from having such a strong focus on compliance and risk mitigation, and looking at not HR as a role of how do we act as a valued partner. I also think HR has the opportunity to really be the company's conscience, and the senior leader's facilitator, by asking questions respectfully, having them look at things through the lens of their values and their mission, rather than, worried more about what's our policy been or our practice been.
Great. Well, Sue, thank you so much for joining us on Business Unusual. Appreciate your insights.
Thank you.
That was Sue Bingham talking to us about how the HR function is changing within corporate America in real time throughout this pandemic. This is Business Unusual. If you're just joining us, a live show where we're talking about the changing nature of work. I want to go ahead and reintroduce the poll that we have for you today in the stream. It's about summer vacations. Did you take one? Are you planning on taking one this fall? A lot of employees who are working from home are telling us on LinkedIn that they're just not taking time off. I'm definitely going to get our panel's take on if that's a good thing or not. But vote right now. A, yes. B, you're hoping to take vacation this fall. C, no. Or D, other. We're going to reveal the results of the poll at the end of today's show. And with that, I want to bring on our panel of HR leaders joining us for a group discussion about everything that's going on the ground. We have Tracy Keogh. She's the Chief HR Officer at HP. Mary O'Hara joining us from Blue Shield of California, and Valerie Love from Coca-Cola. Thank you all for joining us today on the show. Tracy, I want to start with you. I'm going to take us back to March. For those who don't work in HR, what was this like for you at the beginning of the pandemic?
I think it was one of those situations where everything was changing very quickly. And, I think I was lucky because we're in a large global company. So we had some inkling of what was happening with our offices in China. And then as it moved across the world, I think the most important thing was coming together quickly and being able to pivot and make decisions rapidly. I think we were one of the first companies to have everybody work from home. We sent people home early. I'm lucky. First of all, we have a medical director on our staff at HP, so we brought together a multidisciplinary group, and it took communications, business leaders, our environmental health and safety folks, HR, legal coming together, and we created our crisis management team, and then began really, as Sue talked about, communicating very transparently and consistently with our employees to be able to make sure that they knew exactly what was going on.
We actually are seeing in LinkedIn data right now that Chief Medical Officer is one of the fastest growing titles right now in corporate America. So that's interesting that yours was being brought into the discussion for good reasons. Valerie, what about you? What were some of the bigger challenges that you faced early on?
Yeah, absolutely. I would add to what Tracy just shared, all of those things. It was really important for us to make sure we were connecting appropriately with our associates. So in addition to all of the business dynamics that needed to be addressed quickly, we wanted to hear from our associates and make sure we were taking into consideration all of the shifts that needed to be made quickly as our associates were being asked to focus on the work environment and in addition to those things that are important to them in their family setting. So as you can imagine, with school age children, with dual spouses working from home, it really did create the opportunity for us to reimagine the remote working environment. So we quickly stood up a team in each of our regions to really focus on the priorities and the questions around the business and our associates. And we really took a listening approach. We had surveys to help us to determine what were some of the priority questions from our associates or of how best to shift their work environment so that they could continue to be at their best for their families and for work. So it really has been a conscious effort, but listening has been at the forefront of it all.
And Mary, for that to happen, for employees to be coming to work, albeit if it's just in their home office like I am right now, at their best, this is really becoming a mental health crisis for a lot of employers. How is Blue Shield of California just making sure that workers aren't feeling drained as this pandemic continues on?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think health and safety and overall mental health are predominantly the challenges that all of us are facing at this moment while it's prolonged. And so for us, first of all, leading with a sense of humanity and knowing that when you lead with a sense of calm, that in and of itself is a superpower. That people look to leadership for a tone and a sense of hope around whether or not this thing is, going to derail us or to what extent they can trust the information that they're reading and consuming everywhere. So it has included a number of things, but undoubtedly making sure that we're taking misinformation out of the system, that we're being tremendously accessible, leading with a real sense of humanity, including things like taking the financial burden off of our people. We are across the state, and not everybody can afford internet access. Not everybody has mobile. Not everybody actually can afford the implications of working at home in terms of having a desk or a setup or these kinds of things. And we've been very conscious about that as much as we have things like introducing office hours. When you have 7,000 people across the company actually blocking out that lunch period from 12 to 1 or 1:30, then you do give people an opportunity to recharge. You have to recognize that there are enormous mounting toll and burden on people that have young kids that are trying to be mom and dad. They're also trying to be professionals. They're also being teachers at the moment. And you may not have home support. So all of those things really require us as leaders to reframe. And I think Tracy's comments earlier about, really having a sense of outcomes versus rigid around hours, that's been really important, and reinforcing that, giving people lots of support around employee assistance, extending that, backup childcare, those kinds of things that really do help people in a family setting recognize what their constraints are, reduce their financial burdens, and just be more flexible. And two-way dialogue in that with taking misinformation out has been critical.
And for those of you who are just joining the stream, this is Business Unusual. I'm speaking with a panel of HR leaders about how HR function is changing amid this pandemic. I'm going to go ahead and say hello to some members in the stream. Stephanie from Missouri, Rebecca from Idaho, my home state. Hello, Rebecca. Kelly from Spain, Grace from Pennsylvania, and Gerson from Brazil. Thanks for joining us on today's show. And Garrett says, when you put people's health and wealth first, they will perform for you. So Garrett, thanks for that perspective. Tracy, you recently wrote in Quartz that HR just can't go back to the way that things were done before this pandemic. What's perhaps something that HP was doing pre-pandemic that just is a thing of the past now?
You know, I think for us, first of all, we've always been very connected to our employees and have, high satisfaction rates. But I think now you think about the whole family in a different way because you're in people's homes. And so one of the things, we did right away was create an ongoing communication. We call it our HP Spirit calendar. And I send an HP Spirit email out every week with all the kind of activities we're programming to support employees. We created, in probably April, I did a panel with teachers to help employees figure out how they should be teaching their children. And then out of that, we created homework clubs. So we're actually, which are individual kind of tutoring sessions. And, we went from just sort of trying to get through the first few months now to really institutionalizing that in our organization. So we're doing things like, solving educational problems. We're solving, obviously health and safety issues. We have weekly doctor's hours with our medical director for people to ask questions. There's just a level of connectivity that we have with our employees that we actually don't want to lose. And we want to be able to continue that dialogue. We are in constant communication and, get incredibly great ideas. We just heard from some employees, they would love to be able to talk to other parents with children of similar ages. So we created Slack channels that are support groups so people can share best practices of what they're doing during this time frame. And I also think managers, while we always had a lot of empathy and connectivity, and embrace flexibility, not at this level. I think we won't go back to working in the same way. We communicate differently now, we collaborate differently. And so really making sure we take the best of that and continue to propagate that across the organization is really what we focus on now. We've done everything on HP Spirit from a global dance party that we had around the world to online cooking classes to, every health and wellness, financial counseling. So that level of support employees really appreciate and look forward to.
And Valerie, Tracy just gave us tons of examples of how the HR function is expanding to not only just keep workers safe, but sane during this crazy time. How are things changing over at CocaCola?
Yeah, significant changes that are happening. And the well-being space is a big part of that, making sure that we're allowing associates to step back and reassess and reimagine how they get work done, to give permission for associates to say, I need time, and being patient along the way. This is a journey for all of us. This is completely new territory, and understanding that the way we do work will shift post COVID-19 as well. So well-being, when we set up a day once a month for associates to just step away from their day-to-day work and clear their calendars and just have a day of just being. So once a month, it's already on all of our associates' calendars to just refresh and refuel, because we know how important that is for associates to just be able to do that, to balance the things that they have as priorities on their calendars. And so that's been a real big plus for our associates. We also look at how performance management is done when we're virtual, to make sure associates are staying connected with their leaders in a meaningful way to understand priorities and the work that matters most, so that they don't feel like being away from face-to-face meetings will impact performance. It's just prioritizing what must be done and what will be the focus for performance reviews and things of that nature. And we really now understand leadership during times of crisis. This is a time for leaders to show up very differently, very intentionally, and making sure they stay connected. And the one other thing that I would say has been very important is we know that the video fatigue is real. And so we allow our associates permission to say when they would prefer not to connect via video. because we know that can be very exhausting as well. So all those things to try to make the anxiety, or to shift the anxiety level down for our associates has been really important. And we do periodic pulse surveys to hear what's working, what's not working, what additional things we need to shift.
I'm certainly feeling that video fatigue, Valerie. And speaking of video fatigue, I'm going to go ahead and bring the poll back in that we have for you on today's show about vacation. Are you taking one? We know from LinkedIn data that a lot of you aren't, but I think that some of you should. And so how are you feeling about that? Let us know your thoughts in the stream right now. Mary, how are you navigating conversations like that with employees at Blue Shield of California? Are people taking time off right now?
Yeah, we've done a couple of things in that respect, Carolyn. We took a week where we actually shut down the whole company and encouraged everybody to be off, because we were getting to a point where it was really clear that the anxiety and the just overall fatigue and the sense of stress was so mounting as people were continuing to struggle with no daycare, no child care support, risks around bringing home care in, that kind of thing. So we actually shut down for an entire week. We also offered a day of unity in response to some of the issues around diversity, equity, and inclusion. After that is really an opportunity for people to heal, to communicate, and to share with their communities where they might like to get involved. So we are absolutely encouraging time off. And yeah, it's hard when you can't get on a plane or you can't go somewhere really fun, but it's really a challenge when you're not taking time out to not only deal with your physical health, but your mental health. So we're encouraging that, and again, as an organization, done a couple of things to try to really make it easier to do that, where we've deliberately scheduled time where the whole company has been off, and then some choice around this extra day of unity where people can take that based on what really made best sense for their time and their calendar and their work priorities, but really with the intention of healing and contributing at a community level and to really just to recharge.
And Tracy, I'm seeing a question in the stream right now that I think would be great for you to tackle. Andrea says, job security in these unprecedented times has been hard on those unemployed and employed. How is HR keeping staff engaged and lessening the fear of further layoffs? Or how are you communicating with employees overall about layoffs?
Yeah, it's really, I think the thing you have to be is transparent all the time with employees. What we said at the beginning of the pandemic, we paused any job actions or any issues, at least for 2 months, as we figured out what was going to be the length of this and making sure people felt that security. We already had a plan to take some job actions that were based on just business changes, nothing to do with the pandemic, before everything turned. And so we did resume that. And I think what we did was train managers and our HR team to support employees in an even more holistic way during this time, because it was very difficult. You're talking to people in their homes. And I think the most important thing, again, is empathy and really trying to support employees best you can. Those are always the most difficult decisions you have to do. And, we are trying to not take those actions as much as possible, and then redeploy people where possible throughout the organization. But difficult choices have to be made. There are many industries where things have completely dried up for them, and the impact has been really tough. And I would say using all the resources that companies make available to people is really the best approach.
Right. And Valerie, one of the difficult conversations that HR leaders are trying to navigate right now is reopening and a return to the office. We recently did a survey of LinkedIn members, and a lot of people have concerns and anxiety around being asked to return to work. How is CocaCola navigating those conversations?
Thank you so much for that question. It's very timely. At the beginning of the pandemic, or when it was very clear that we needed to make some adjustments in the workplace, we stood up a campus-based team to really assess timing of returning our associates to work. And we've been very thoughtful in that, and we've been communicating ongoing timing of that. And we're leveraging external organizations to help ensure we make informed decisions. So we've talked with the CDC, we're engaged with other federal government agencies to make sure the timing is right and we are able to keep our associates safe. We've determined that people can work effectively remotely, so we haven't rushed to make a decision. In the May timeframe, we determined that we would not return to the office for the balance of this year, that people would remain external, working remotely, except from some of our campus critical associates. And we were very thoughtful in ensuring we had the right processes in place to better ensure the safety of those that were continuing to go into the workplace, whether they were in our plants or in our office environment. We've made a decision to, as I mentioned, keep the office closed, other than for those associates that I just mentioned, through the back half of this year. And what we've committed to our associates is that well in advance of determining when we would phase associates back in, we would communicate that to them based on informed information from external organizations. So our associates have commented to us on many occasions that they really appreciate the ability to flex their work environment, but also the open, transparent communication around timing, because we know it's so important with schools opening and associates having both childcare issues and oftentimes elderly care issues, that we needed to proactively provide updates in a timely manner. And we're planning to do that. Our commitment is to continue this work and update our associates in the mid-October to end of October timeframe in advance of the holidays.
Great. And Mary, we're certainly still in the trenches of this pandemic, but as you look out and you look forward to how your role is going to change moving out of this crisis and how just HR in general is going to change, what's top of mind for you?
Well, I think it's true that our fundamental responsibility is to enable a business strategy. And the way that we do that in our functions to make sure that you have a people strategy that aligns to where the business is heading. What are the capabilities that you need? What is the environment and the context within which people are operating? How are you creating a system-wide sense of motivation against the purpose and the mission that you have? How you ultimately help people feel like they're part of something that's bigger than themselves. And our role is to try to create both a high-performing organization made up of high-performing teams that brings in and helps to promote and grow high-performing individuals. I don't believe that's changed in essence around what the core of our responsibility is. It's just more dynamic in terms of the change that's happening around us. And so it requires us, I think, to have a tremendously informed and learning posture. That two-way engagement and willingness to adapt and understanding that we can't be committed to old paradigms, letting go of convention, being very accessible, and again, leading with a sense of humanity anchored in what your values are. That's what I believe our role is, and it will continue to be in the most dynamic environment that I think most of us have ever worked in.
That's right.
Well, Mary, Tracy, Valerie, thank you so much for joining us on Business Unusual. I'm seeing some comments in the stream. Janine says, HR function has to adjust to the health and well-being of its employees. Flexibility is key for retention. Leading with humanity, support, patience, and communication will show value and appreciation for employees. So thank you for insights on the show, as well as your leadership during this challenging time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was our panel of HR leaders around the country talking to us about how they're navigating this crisis in real time. I want to thank Tracy from HP, Valerie from Coca-Cola, as well as Mary from Blue Shield of California for joining us on today's show. And with that, I want to reveal the results of the poll that we have for you today in the stream around vacations. Did you take one? Looks like a majority of you did not, unfortunately. We see votes for yes from Annabelle, Jim, Christine, Sonia, and Carrie were able to do something to get away from the Zoom fatigue. But no, Karen, Alexander, Gregory, Cindy, Dolores, Anita, Millie, Debbie all said that they were not able to take a vacation. We have some comments. Andrea says no vacation plans due to travel restrictions. Emily says no vacation this year. There are still too many restrictions around the country to make it fun or feasible. We want to thank you for voting in the stream today. And if you don't take a vacation, just take some time off, perhaps from home. That's definitely recommended. What I'm hearing from experts on LinkedIn, it's important to take some time off. And this is Business Unusual, a live show coming to you every weekday for 12 Eastern from the LinkedIn news page. And tomorrow, my colleague, Susie Jackson, will be with you with a show, our work from home tips and tricks and how you can make remote work more sustainable. She'll be joined by Laura Vanderkam, the author of The New Corner Office, about how the most successful people work from home. I'll definitely be tuning in and hope that you join us as well. I'm Caroline Fairchild. See you next time.